Well, before he was one of the three amigos, or the jerk, or the father of the bride, Steve Martin had a very successful stand-up comedy career. And it was like in the 70s. And so in the 70s, he was selling out arenas at a time where comedians just didn't do that. That was like, Kiss and Steve Martin. Like that's, I may have showed how young I am by saying when Kiss was, and I don't know when Kiss was. But before I knew who Steve Martin was, he had an entire career who shaped the world of stand-up comedy, and I didn't even know about it until decades into my life because I only knew him as one of the three amigos. And he had this career that he was so successful that he would get on stage and he would get in the arena and the crowd would be just cheering and roaring so loud. The laughter would be so loud they couldn't get his mic loud enough to where they could hear it. Like it was just this massive noise the entire time he was on stage, to where eventually the reason he got out of stand-up comedy was because of his success. He was so successful, he couldn't do stand-up anymore. He had no small rooms where he could work out new material. He had nothing new he could do. His entire life was filled with arenas, and he had nowhere to work on anything new. And so eventually he just got out of it. He just left one day because what he was putting on stage wasn't good, and he couldn't work on anything new, and no one could hear what he was doing because people were cheering so loud, wall to wall, the entire time. And when you look at that, and when people go up and they look at this man with an arrow going through his head, or some dumb joke he was doing, you would look and go, oh, see, it's just, look at that, it's just overnight success. Just out of nowhere, he shows up, and just the next thing you know, he's selling out arenas. But what's happening is the people who went to see him in the arenas, they saw a snapshot of his life. They saw a moment in time where an entire lifetime of work culminated to where he's selling out these arenas. What they didn't see was the road that took him there. The amount of time, the amount of energy, the amount of effort. And very often when you and I see someone at the top of their game, at the highest point of their success, the highest point of their fame, we see them as a snapshot. And we don't see the entireless and the grueling work that led up to it. In 2007, he wrote a book called Born Standing Up, Steve Martin did. And he said this. He summarized his entire stand-up comedy career. He said this: I did stand-up comedy for 18 years. 10 of those were spent learning, 4 were spent refining, and 4 were spent in wild success. That was his trajectory. That was what he lived through, and what everyone else thinks about is the arrow on the head and some dumb, the juggling he knows how to do and all that sort of stuff, the banjo. But it was all built on 14 years of work. And the overnight success is a lie. It always has been. If you ever find an overnight success, what you will find is a decade of someone living in obscurity. Just working. When there was a time when if you would have seen Steve Martin on stage, he would have been more interested in getting you to hang out with him than for you to hang out with him, than for you to get him to hang out with you. You'd have been like, hey man, cool thing with the juggling, but I got like friends over here, and he'd be by himself because he was in the learning stage. This is what Tom Brady had to deal with as he got closer and closer to his retirement. He said in an interview one time, he said, I've gotten to the point where my mind has basically figured out football. I've seen almost everything you can throw at me in a football field. The question now is, will my body be able to do what my mind knows it's supposed to do? Why is it that these full-grown men who can play one of the hardest sports on earth are super strong, super athletic, and then they cry at their retirement speech? Because they know this entire road I've walked down to get to this point is over. Like all that work, all that stuff I'm now moving to something else. And I got to the pinnacle of it, and now it's time to go somewhere else. What you and I see out of these people is a snapshot. And we almost never see the broken road that leads there. And we're in a point in our series, the Old School, where David has just become king. We're looking at the just basic trajectory of the Old Testament, and I'm going to go ahead and admit right now, the next 3 weeks are going to be a little bit out of chronological order, but that's okay. We had to shift some things around. It's summer, and who really cares? But I've been pretty in one direction this whole time up to this point, and I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But there's this moment we get in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 6 that is almost like a snapshot. Most of us have heard this. Most of us heard references to this. It's the moment where David dances in his underwear, but he's not really in his underwear. Don't worry, cover your ears. He's not really in his underwear, but this is the moment, right, where he's bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and he's just become king, and the kingdom's getting united under him, and all 12 tribes have agreed, we will become one nation under you, David, and it's a great thing. And he comes in, and he's dancing in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and there's torchlight, and in my mind, there's just like this silhouette of people, and they're all dancing, there's trumpets and tambourines and all sorts of things, and it's such a wonderful moment, this moment of like elation and catharsis, like this, it's finally here type thing going on. It's like you can hear the echoes of that old great promise coming. I will make you into a great nation, echoing through the ears of the people of God. And they're looking at it going, we have a new capital, Jerusalem. We have the Ark of the Covenant coming in. We have a new King David. And it's all happening. It's all coming to fruition. And the thing we have to remember is that snapshot, whatever you think of when you think of David dancing in the city streets with the Ark of the Covenant and all the people around, whatever you think about that, that is a snapshot. And it absolutely did not just happen. No one in the Bible just snapped their fingers and said, ha, we're here, let's go do it. But in reality, there is a very long and a very broken road that brought the people of God to this point in history. In fact, as we read this story, just in chapter 6, there's almost this, it's almost like a microcosm of the entire story that David had to live through, of how nothing was ever just, it's good and we can be happy about it. There's always brokenness kind of permeating the whole story. And so here's the deal. Not Matthew, goodness, I'm already jumping to Jesus, everybody. Maybe that's God, We'll get back to the New Testament. All right, 2 Samuel chapter 6. Verse 3, it says, but here's the deal. Even in this story, even in just the smallest section of this story, that snapshot still didn't just happen. There's, in this very short time frame, a broken road that leads to this moment of the Ark of the Covenant coming into Jerusalem. So here it is. David is anointed king as a kid, and then he has to spend years running away from the king who's trying to kill him. And then he gets anointed as king again, but this time it's in front of all the people. It's not just from a prophet of God, it's for the whole people. They all decide to be a part of David's kingdom. And he goes and he conquers Jerusalem. They have their new capital city. And in verse 2 he says, they set the ark of God on a new cart, and they brought it from the house of Abinadab. It's just some guy. The Ark of the Covenant's been living in his house for like 20 years. Just some guy. And so he goes, let's bring it in, which was on a hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were going to guide the cart with the Ark of Covenant of God on it. And Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with them with all their might before the Lord, with castanets and harps and lyres and timbrels and sistrums and cymbals. And when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the Ark of God because one of the oxen stumbled. Okay, you got the image? They're walking, an ox stumbles, the ark's falling over, okay? So what are you going to do? One of the guys goes, we can't have that. And he puts his hand up, he grabs hold of it, and the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act, and therefore God struck him down, and he died beside the ark of God. And David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. And David was afraid of the Lord. And he said, how can we bring the ark of the Lord into the city? Come after me. He was not willing to bring the ark of the Lord with him into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom, which is just another guy, a Gittite. And the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord had blessed his entire household. Even in this story, David can't just make something happen. Now, if you want to talk about a broken road, have any of you tried to throw an event where things went so haywire that someone just died in the middle of it? Now, if the answer is yes, please don't raise your hand. I can't deal with that today. But, that's supposed to be funny, but you'd really bring the mood down if you said yes. I actually have been there. Maybe some of the nurses in the room have been there. But David's got his whole thing working out. And right in the middle of it, a guy dies. And everybody's looking at him. David's going, well, what do I do now? And he's like, well, I'm not taking it any farther. I'm not going any further down the road. And so they just drop it off at this house of this guy named Obed-Edom. Like, now it's going to be your house for a while. And everything about this guy's house just like flourishes. Like, it's just blessings all over the place. And it's like this story is like a little microcosm of the life of David. Because it'd be really easy to look at the life of David and go, here's what his life was. He was a shepherd boy. And the prophet Samuel came and anointed him as the future king of Israel. And then he went off and he fought Goliath and he killed him and he set his people free. And then he became king. But in reality, shortly after killing Goliath and getting all the fame and fortune that comes with that, he looks up one day and he finds a spear lodged in the wall behind him. And it was from the king. And it was meant for him. And he has to run for his life. And he spends years of his life running from the king, hunting him down with his whole army. He has to live in caves and in Gentile lands, wondering if his God has forgotten him, if that anointing meant nothing. What was going to happen next? And David traveled down a very broken road to get to this point. And here's what's really weird. In the story of David, most of the brokenness that you're going to read about in the life of David is going to happen after this point. What we get with these snapshots and these moments where all of these pieces of our life seem to start making sense for a moment is they're not arrivals. They're not the things where you go, oh, now I've arrived. Now I'm like a good human person. Now I've made it to what God has called me to be, and I'm going to be this forever, and I'm done. No, that happens in heaven. This broken road takes us all the way into heaven. We are learning, we are growing, we are being shaped by God all the way home. And what the snapshots are of where things seem to be making sense along the way, when a lot of the times they spend not making sense, is what those are, the little beacons of light throughout our lives that remind us our God has not abandoned us. Our God is working in our lives. I can see how this whole season of my life kind of shaped up and wrapped up here. And now I can see how God was walking with me in that previous time. Although back here I couldn't see it. But once I got through it and I looked backwards, I could see it clearly that God was with me the whole way. And I wish I could go back there and live every step along the way in full confidence that God was with me right then, because He is. And here's what's fascinating. They have this whole moment. After 3 months, they look at Obed-Edom, and they see how his house, everything in his house is blessed. Everything in his house is just like blowing up. And David goes, I want that for all Israel. Let's try this again. Let's get it back over here. And so then they go back to the law, and they figure out how they're supposed to do this thing the right way, because they weren't supposed to carry it on a cart. No one's allowed to touch the ark. Everybody knows that. It's well established. And so this time he goes back and he brings it in, and he says, and this time wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing the ark of the covenant of the Lord in, and there was shouts and trumpets. They're trying it again, but this time they have those acacia wooden poles that God said, this is how I want you to carry the ark, and they bring it in, and they finally do it. And they bring it in, and they set it in the middle of Jerusalem, and God has been brought back into His people, and everything's been made whole. It's wonderful. And then he goes home, and he gets in a fight with his wife. Isn't that the worst? Now, I know you know that. Here's what you probably don't know. Every pastor that I know, every pastor knows what this feels like. You can get done with something that's amazing, where everyone in the room is going, wow, can you believe how God showed up? Oh, can you believe what God's doing in our church? Can you believe what event we just did? This whole thing was awesome. And we all have a story where then we go home and get in a fight with our wife. And you probably have a story like that too. And you go, how does this keep happening? Like, how does one follow the next? And the reason is because this is life, man. And you're not perfect, and I'm not perfect. David's not perfect. And he gets home, and when he gets home to his wife, this is what it says, verse 20. It says, when David returned home to bless his household, Michal, the daughter of Saul, so he married the daughter of the previous king, came out to meet him, and he said, how the king of Israel distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls, of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would. Oh, what a great show the king put on today. Did you get enough time with those servant girls, did you? Was that fun? And he looks at her and he says, it was before the Lord. I wasn't dancing in front. I wasn't there to just go hang out with the young ladies. It was in front of God I was dancing. And then listen to what he says. It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone in your house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people, Israel. Whew. What a strained marriage, huh? Now, you've never said anything that cold to your wife or husband, have you? No? Just me and Megan? Okay, Megan, we're getting judged real hard up here today. But isn't that fascinating? Right on the other side of this amazing moment where God's finally making something happen and things are going up and to the right, you fall back into that old thing and you're like, what is happening here? It's because the broken road never leaves. The journey we are on following God is a broken path that has pitfalls and rock slides. There's harrowing escapes on either side of it. Like it's a hard road to walk. And here's what Eugene Peterson says. He says, the story of David is not a story of what God wants us to be, because oftentimes he fails mightily, but it's rather a story of God working with the raw materials of our lives as he finds us. And what he's saying is this: you're not going to escape the broken road. You're not going to just... Last week we talked about the draw and temptation to go away from our God and the draw into leaving God behind and how we will soon regret that, and that's all true. But this week we're going to talk about the fact that is going to happen. You're not going to bat 1,000 on that. You're not going to be a perfect person saying, I've avoided every mistake along the way. That's not going to be you. And it hasn't been me. And it hasn't been any elder in our church. It's not the way. But what happens to our relationship with God when we go down that road? When we do fall off the path and we do make our mistakes, God says, get back up. Let's keep going. I'm so encouraged by the fact that one of the biggest analogies and illustrations God uses for what it means to be a Christian is someone who follows Jesus. Jesus walked around and he said, follow me. What does that mean? Well, there are times when you're not following him. How do you solve that problem? You start following him again. You get back up and you keep moving forward. You can look at King David and King Saul's reigns in the Bible in very similar fashions. They had a rise and they had a fall. But King Saul went down in history as a failure, and King David went down as a man after God's own heart. And the question is, what's the difference? And the answer was, every single time David came crawling back to God. His life was one of repentance over and over again. It's funny, there's almost no character in the Bible you learn more about than David. We have an enormous amount of his stories, and then in the Psalm book, we have an enormous amount of his prayers. And so we have both the actions of his life and the thoughts of his life. And Eugene Peterson says it's not a mistake that the person you know the most about in the Bible is also the person who had spent the most time in prayer. And there were plenty of mistakes, plenty of times he went down that broken road, but he kept coming back to God because God was faithful. And so, what we do, and the same is true for us today, that as we go through our lives, and it has its ups and it has its downs, and it has the things that are our faults, and things that are just random, things that times we've abandoned God, and times just things got messy and we didn't know what to do. We are walking down the same broken path. And God doesn't offer us something that says, hey, don't you want to just not have to live normal human life anymore? But rather, he says, do you want to go down that path with me? Do you want me to be the person who's faithfully next to you all the way down the road? And so that as your life progresses, as your time with God progresses, you make hopefully fewer and fewer of those mistakes along the way, because you've learned how to live like Jesus, you've learned how to go about them. But in order to do that, we have to learn to trust God. We have to trust that in the moments where it feels like He's not there, He is there. In the moments where it feels like He's abandoned us, He has not abandoned us. That He is faithful every step of the way. And so here are some questions we can ask ourselves. What are some areas where we are not trusting God? What are some areas where we feel like we have to hedge our bets? Maybe you trust God, but you're also but I'm also going to do this thing over here to protect me in case He doesn't come through for me. Like, what are some areas? That's another way of not trusting God. And here's one. How am I stopping myself from going all in with God because I'm not sure that He'll come through for me? Christianity is an all-in faith. It's a faith where we say, God, I'm in this with you. I'm not taking a little bit of Christianity, and a little bit from the world, and a little bit from this over here. No, I'm all in with you. How can I go all in with you? And the question is, how do we do that in those moments of our life where it feels like He's not there? Where it feels like this story's never going to resolve in a meaningful way? Well, there's two verses I like to quote a lot, and you've probably heard me quote them. One is from Hebrews chapter 6. It says this: we have this hope as an anchor for our soul. One of the problems with that broken road that we walk down is that our souls want to wander. Our souls want to go running haywire, right? And I love this illustration because it has the illustration of you kind of bobbing on top of water. And if the water, if you're, I don't know if you, I'm from Tybee, I'm from Savannah, so that's a coastal town. But if you go to the ocean and you're like, all right, I'm going to go stand in the water right here. If it wants to push you down this way, guess what that water is going to do? It's going to push you down that way. You're not going to just fight against it. You're not going to just keep it from pushing you. It will push you wherever it wants to push you, unless you have what? An anchor. And so as we're bobbing on the waves of our life that want to push us all over the place, we have something that is tethered to the ground, something that's actually holding something strong that keeps us in place. And the Bible's saying this is what our hope in Jesus is for our lives. It is an anchor that as our souls want to wander, as our souls want to run wild, it keeps us stable. It keeps us reminding us that we have a faithful God who loves us. The next one is this: we live by faith and not by sight. Now, sometimes Christianity gets the accusation that we're a blind faith kind of religion. And now, in some ways we are, because you can't prove 100% that God's real, can't prove 100% the things we believe about Jesus, but there's a lot of good reasons to believe what we believe about Jesus. But this is, sometimes they claim, well, Christians just kind of do whatever, and they throw their reason out the window, and they go, I'll just do whatever because it's blind faith, I have faith. That's not what this is talking about, okay? We do want thoughtful Christians in the world, okay? We want people to think through and try to do what's right. But what this is talking about is walking by faith, not by sight. Means, here's an illustration Tim Keller gave that was really helpful for me. Imagine you have a doctor. He says, hey, you have this little lump on your rib cage, and it's not cancer, it's not bad, it's not anything, but it'd be kind of annoying, so maybe we just want to take it out, and that way you don't have to deal with it. And there's nothing wrong, nothing dangerous. We're going to do it in my doctor's office. We're not going to go to the hospital. We can do it right here. Everything's fine. And you go home thinking, wow, this doctor really knows what he's doing. He's a good doctor. He has all his head on straight. He has all the confidence in the world. And so you feel good about the surgery, right? And then the day comes, and the nurse calls your name. You know how nurses do, where they say your last name first. And you go, okay, what? And you start getting a little nervous, and you get into the room, and you see the knives laid out in a straight line, and you see the lighting's all weird and bright and hard, and then you see straps on the table and go, why are the straps on the table? And you start getting nervous about this surgery, right? And you start getting nervous, and you go, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Now here's the question, what changed? Did you get new information about this doctor? Did you get reason to believe that this doctor was not as good as he said he was? Did you learn that he was the doctor from Face Off that switched Nicolas Cage and John Travolta's face? Like, well, what did you learn about this doctor? You learned nothing new about this doctor. It was your sight that changed. It was the things you saw with your own eyes. And that started to cloud out what you knew already. And so what God's saying is, listen, we can sit here on a Sunday morning and all agree together. I'm going to trust in God as I move on in my week today. I'm going to go to my midweek Bible studies. We're going to learn how to live this life. We're going to do it the right way. As this situation shows up or that situation shows up, we're going to do it the right way. It's going to be great. And then you get out there and you start looking around with your own eyes. You start going, wow, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Oh, this is more uncomfortable than I thought it was going to be. Oh, this is worse. And then that starts to crowd out what you believe because of what you're seeing around you. And Paul's going, we walk by faith and not by sight. The way we live our life is going to be based on what we believe and not on the things we see around us that are making us nervous. We walk by faith. And these two questions, in these two verses of the anchor for our soul and walking by faith, they can help us and figure this out. What are some areas of our lives where we're not trusting God? Where we're walking by sight and not by faith? What are some areas where we're hedging our bets? And what are some ways that we've not gone all in with God because we're not entirely sure He's going to come through for us? Here's what I want to challenge you to do. I want you to remember some of the snapshots of your life. Some of the moments where you can remember sitting down and going, oh, it worked out. Oh, He did come through for me. Oh, it did make sense for that small amount of time. And I want you to remember them and let them serve as proof that God has not abandoned you now. Let them be proof that God is still walking with you right now. And it may look weird, it may look bad, it may look broken, but He's guiding you through your life. And He's saying, don't give up on me. Because we have a God who does not give up on us. The Japanese have a tradition called Kintsugi. And it's something they do where if you break some pottery, they don't get rid of it. They don't throw it away. They've discovered this way of mending their pottery with lacquer and gold. And they put the pieces back together. And on the other end of it, it is not viewed as a fixed piece of what's the word? Pottery? Okay. I kept wanting to say poverty. Goodness gracious. It's not a fixed piece of pottery. It's a new piece of art. It's a treasured item in the home. And what happens on the other side of being broken is a beauty that you didn't know was there beforehand. And what happens for you and me as we walk down the broken road with Jesus is that He takes our brokenness. And He doesn't say you need to be ashamed of that for the rest of your life. Oh, that's you, but we're going to hide that from everybody else for right now. You're going to say, no, this is me. This is the me that God took because He takes the raw materials of our lives. We're not perfect people, but He takes the raw material of our lives and He puts us back together. And he lines us with gold. And He doesn't say, well, that's the broken pottery. We're going to put that on the back shelf. That if push comes to shove, we'll put it out there. No. He says, this is my child. This is my son. This is my daughter. This is my work of art that I've found on the broken road of life. I brought them back to me. And I've mended their wounds. And on this side of their brokenness, There is a beauty that they could have never gotten on their own. They could have never gotten it they could have never hidden their brokenness well enough to make anyone think they're as beautiful as they are now. They could never have fixed themselves up. They could have never read enough self-help books. They could never have worked hard enough. They could have never proven themselves enough to produce what God wants to make of the raw materials of our lives. That's the gospel. That as we walk the broken road, we have a Savior who leads us home, is making something of us, making something of the brokenness that we have made of our lives. It's grace. It's love. It's kindness. The kindness of God poured into our lives. So we're just like this pottery. He is making something brand new with us. And our job is to not give up early. Our job is not to get off the road and just throw our hands up and quit. It's too hard. Because it's going to be hard without God too. It's hard with God, it's hard without God. You might as well stick with God. Because He's repairing you. Lined with gold. Brought in as a piece of art that He loves so much. That's the gospel. The broken road's hard, but it's good. And He loves you. Jesus said this. He had a cousin named John the Baptist. He was a wild man. He was kind of crazy. He ate bugs and stuff like that. But he was a good man. He was a good man. And he said, of all the men born of women, meaning of every natural person you've ever met in your life, every person you've ever met in your world, all the men born of women, there is no one greater than John. Because he was the best. If you want to just go morality, he's the best. You want to just go, he has this good head on his shoulders, he's the best that you'll ever find. Then he says, the least in the kingdom of heaven, the worst Christian you can find, the least in the kingdom of heaven was better than John the Baptist. And that's because what Jesus Christ can make of me is better than the best thing any person out there can make of themselves. Our lives get hectic. There are times where we don't understand everything. There are times where we don't know what's next and don't know what to do. But we must not give up. Because we have a Savior who is making brand new things out of the raw materials of our lives. And we got to keep the faith.